Hey everyone, Roman Prokopchuk here. Vladimir Putin mobilizes or conducts or announces a partial mobilization of 300,000 reservists. So, those that have served in the Russian military at one point or another, their serving process is anyone between the ages of 18 and 27 within that time frame has to serve 1 year in the military. And if you are in university or college, you have to learn a military curriculum as well as your existing curriculum. So go to kind of a special military academy where you're still kind of learning both, and in that sense being trained to potentially become an officer as well. So there's a asterisk, a slight caveat in this partial mobilization that there's an addendum written that basically it's up to 1 million reservists. So Russia claims that they have 25 million military reservists in total if they wanted to mobilize or call up all of them. Obviously, that wouldn't be a partial mobilization at that point. But this 300,000 number isn't 300,000. It's written in that it's up to 1 million. So theoretically, 1 million can be called now. And what does that look like for Ukraine? Well, the Russian population is seeing that facts aren't adding up. If Russia claims that only 5,000 or 6,000 Russian troops have died in the war in Ukraine, then why is there a mobilization to obviously replenish ranks? One, those 300,000 aren't going to be mobilized overnight. There's logistical issues in terms of providing gear, equipment, ammunition, supplies, food, transport, and with another potential counteroffensive coming in the east before, winter really sets in, they're just going to be cannon fodder. So right now, the military is kind of at max capacity in terms of what they're doing in Ukraine. There's not that many offensive movements other than in the east around Bakhmut. There's no pushes anywhere really. Ukraine is on the offensive, obviously, in the south around Kherson and still pushing from the Kharkiv Oblast into Luhansk as well, and trying to go after Lyman right now within the that area or that sphere of fighting. So what are they really going to do? Potentially shore up weak points in their front. It's obviously quite a long front. If they had any kind of specialized role like logistics, transport, so on and so forth, but regardless of how are you going to retrain these 300,000 potential called up individuals. This isn't like the US military where if you're in the reserves, periodically during the year you do a few days, I think what is it? A week in a month or something like that, or 3 days a month in the US in terms of military reserves, and they don't necessarily do that in Russia. So they have to theoretically be retrained, refitted. That training isn't going to be long or consist of anything that's going to help them. A lot of them and majority of them haven't been in a real world combat zone situation, so they're going to be thrown not qual situation where at this point it's like max capacity in terms of Western help coming into Ukraine. So at this point, HIMARS, howitzers, and other artillery pieces have really precise ammunition, and some of which, in terms of the degree of unsurety or the degree of being off, is only a few feet or a foot or two in terms of the target area. So there's going to be a big problem. Obviously, Ukraine has demonstrated that they can hit targets and military installations, military camps, bases, air defense systems within Russia itself. So if Russians are trying to bring in on land these potential troops in the Belgorod area or any area that kind of borders Ukraine, Ukraine can hit that on the way. So some of these potential troops aren't even going to make it into the battle or the front. They could be basically taken out en route. What are you going to do? Fly them in? There's a sheer number of troops potentially need to be brought in, Ukraine has shot down tons of aircraft and helicopters in Ukraine already that are Russian. So what are you going to do? Sacrifice that in air casualties? So it's really obviously poorly thought out. It's desperate. Obviously, I feel like a lot of the time, like we talk about animals, a cornered animal is, the most dangerous animal in terms of the state. So Vladimir Putin is theoretically running out of a lot of options. At this point, the total death count or killed in action count is of today, September 22nd, is around 56,000, which is obviously a crazy amount. Russia hasn't suffered losses like this since World War II, and those are just killed in action. Just think about it. There may be another 80, 100,000 if it's 2 to 1 potential injured and being taken out of the fight. So there's a big conundrum of how this is going to go through in terms of logistically, and then once it was announced, every aged military aged man or men, I believe they announced that 18 to 60 or 65 has to stay in the country. So all these men and families are flooding every border crossing. I believe in terms of the border crossing with Finland, there was a 35-kilometer wait line to get out of Russia. There was a long line from Russia to Georgia and other places in terms of getting out of Russia itself. Flights were booked, sold out. Prices were 4 or 5 times what they usually are to fly out to places like Dubai and just get out of the country. So some of the people that were so patriotic last month, the night before, the month before, and throughout since February, are no longer so patriotic or so in favor when they have to actually go fight this war, and not the ones that are enlisted, the existing conscripts and the existing professional military, as well as obviously mercenaries, Wagner Group, and things of that nature. So kind of the tables have turned. So people aren't doing anti-war protests in Russia because some of them happen over time. They were smaller, St. Petersburg, Moscow, when the war started, a little bit after, and then for the most part, they stopped. Not everybody obviously supports the war and have protested, but you see these mass protests since yesterday, they are not anti-war, because if these people were so against the war, they'd be protesting this whole time and protesting the death of Ukrainians, the genocide, what Russia is illegally doing in the country. This is an anti-mobilization. They're just scared to go to Ukraine and potentially just get, meat grindered out and get killed for no reason really, other than Vladimir Putin ordered it. So a lot of people are saying, the brave Russians, they're coming out because they don't want to go. They don't want to get mobilized. That's why they're trying to flee the country. That's why they're trying to fly out, drive out, swim out, paddle out, teleport out, whatever they can do, because like I said, this isn't 300,000. This is a potential 1 million. And the irony of this, the people that were protesting not going and being mobilized, they're being enlisted. So out of, I believe, the 12 or 1500 people that were arrested yesterday, the 21st of September, they're being sent and automatically enlisted in the military and sent to Ukraine, which is ridiculous, obviously highly illegal in most senses in most countries, but it is Russia. The news is reporting now that Russia has suffered defeats in Kharkiv and other places, so it's not like as easy to cover up some of this information that we're doing so great, it's awesome. Well, if it's so awesome and you only have, 5,000, 6,000 KIA, and you have a force of 150 to 200 potential thousand troops, Russian troops in Ukraine, why are you calling up another 300,000? You're not saying, hey, we're doing a big offensive. We need all these troops, which obviously aren't trained, haven't seen any battle. Like I said, majority of them, and throwing them into a battle is pretty much crazy. So the Russian population is finally opening their eyes, but not in the sense that, hey, Russia's doing something wrong or has done something wrong since they invaded or illegally, obviously, entered another sovereign nation and declared war on it. They basically have an issue when it comes down to them, and now they have to fight. So it's going to be interesting to see if it's going to be 300,000, a million, and what difference it's going to really have. So right now, also, the men that are fighting in Ukraine, Russian troops, they don't have any people to basically give them any leave. There's no rotations. You spend a few months in the battle, the fronts, wherever you're stationed, and then you rotate out and get some leave to, kind of recuperate physically and mentally, and then be brought back. So potentially these 300,000 are going to relieve some of the men that are already fighting, but the already men that are fighting are getting experience and have been there the whole time. So they're familiar. Obviously, they may be poorly equipped in a position where they're getting slaughtered, but they actually know how fighting is, what's going on, some of the areas that they're in. Now, you're being replenished and cycled out by people that haven't seen any war. So are they going to do better or worse than the people that are already giving up land that Ukraine is taking back and deoccupying? Who knows? But I think that's really going to be the case. And then the sense of, you're not allowed to send or, mobilize if it's not a war. They're trying to get around that by doing these fake referendums. So in Luhansk and Donetsk, for them to be absorbed by Russia, and Zaporizhia, or obviously some of Zaporizhia, as well as the Kherson Oblast, to absorb them, and now they're part of Russia. So now they can go defend Russian territory. Well, that's not going to work. One, it would be illegal regardless if there was a conflict and armed war fighting going on in each of these areas, or along obviously the front that covers all of these areas. But how are you supposed to theoretically, obviously, it wouldn't be a fair vote, but how are you supposed to vote when a large part of your, territory that you're holding is fighting, and it's not going to be any kind of fair representation? So another obviously sham referendum like they had in Crimea back in the day in 2014. So are these 300,000 potential troops coming in going to have some kind of impact? I don't see it. Maybe, even out the numbers per se, but not give it this automatic boost like, it's bringing in all this advanced technology that will give it upper hand. These 300,000, like I said, have to be equipped, armed, supplied, logistically resupplied over time, and, you're gonna throw 50,000 people in an area, okay, so Ukraine cuts it off, encircles the area, you have 50,000 potential, obviously, KIA wounded or POWs. So we'll see what happens. We'll see to the level of unrest this reaches. Obviously, it may result in potentially a regime change, but Putin's getting desperate. Obviously, he's very paranoid at this point with those around him, his inner circle. So we'll see what direction it takes. Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава нації! Слава Богу! God bless.